Have you ever felt the sting of words not meant for your ears? The kind that slice through you when they think you can't hear them? Poor Rebecca. She really let herself go after Jason left. No wonder he upgraded to Vanessa. Single mom. With a teenager, she'll never find anyone new. I still remember the exact moment I overheard those whispers at my daughter's school concert. 3 PTA moms, designer coffees in hand, dissecting my failed marriage like it was the latest reality show. I stood frozen behind them, program clutched in my hands, wondering if I should speak up or slink away. I chose silence that day. Just smiled tightly when they finally noticed me and scattered like startled birds. But my 13-year-old daughter, Emma? She made a very different choice at her father's wedding. One that left a room full of country, club elites completely stunned. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Miller, and 2 years ago, my husband of 15 years told me he had outgrown our life together while we were decorating our Christmas tree. Emma was upstairs working on a school project, and I was hanging the ornament we bought on our honeymoon, a delicate glass sailboat from Cape Cod. Jason waited until my back was turned, until my hands were full with something fragile, to tell me he was leaving. "I've met someone else," he said, his voice oddly flat. "Vanessa. She works in marketing at the firm." The sailboat slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. I remember thinking how fitting it was. This tiny symbol of our beginning breaking just as he announced our end. "How long?" I asked, not looking at him as I knelt to pick up the glass pieces. 6 months, he answered. Then, "Be careful, you'll cut yourself." Too late for that warning, I thought. When we told Emma the next day, she didn't cry. She just looked at her father with those searching blue eyes, my eyes, and asked, "Is it because Mom works too much at the garden center?" Because she could cut back her hours. It broke my heart that her first instinct was to fix me, as if I was the broken part of our family. Jason told her it was grown-up stuff, and sometimes people just change. He promised nothing would change with her, that he'd still see her every weekend, that he'd never miss a recital or a soccer game. Promises scatter like ashes in the wind after divorce. The first 6 months were a fog of paperwork, moving boxes, and Emma's silent treatments. I downsized us from our 4-bedroom colonial in Lakeview to a townhouse near Parkside Elementary. Jason moved into a sleek downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman. Every other weekend, Emma would pack her little purple duffel bag and disappear into his new life, returning with shopping bags and stories about Vanessa's smoothie recipes and hot yoga studio. Vanessa says green juice is why her skin glows. Emma informed me one Sunday night as I served her mac and cheese, her favorite comfort food since kindergarten. "Does it now?" I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "She says you should try it. It might help with..." Emma gestured vaguely at my face, my body. I touched my cheek self-consciously. I knew what I looked like. The divorce had etched itself into me. The dark circles, the stress weight, the forgotten haircuts. I'd been so focused on keeping our new life afloat financially and emotionally that things like green juice and glowing skin seemed like luxuries from another universe. "Maybe I'll pick some up next time I'm at Whole Foods," I lied, knowing full well my grocery budget stretched just far enough for the basics at the regular supermarket these days. It wasn't just my appearance that became gossip fodder in Oak Ridge. It was everything. How I drove my 10-year-old Honda while Jason upgraded to a Tesla. How I sold most of our furniture to pay for Emma's soccer camp. How I converted our dining room into a home office where I took on extra landscape design projects at night after my regular shifts at Bloom and Grow Garden Center. "Your mom seems intense these days," I overheard Jason tell Emma once when he picked her up. As if my Intensity was a character flaw rather than the fuel keeping our downsized life running. The whispers followed me everywhere in our town. At the Morning Brew coffee shop, where the barista would give me a sympathetic head tilt with my regular coffee. At the garden center, where clients would suddenly remember they'd seen Jason and that gorgeous marketing girl at the Grand Oaks resort having dinner. At parent-teacher conferences, where I now sat alone, feeling other parents' eyes on me. But the worst moment came at the annual Oak Ridge Charity Gala, an event Jason and I had always attended together. I almost didn't go this year, 9 months after the separation. But Eleanor, my eternally optimistic mother, insisted. "You helped plan that event for years, Rebecca. You belong there just as much as Jason does," she said firmly while helping me zip up the only formal dress I had kept, a simple black sheath I'd bought 3 years ago. "I don't know, Mom," I said, fussing with my hair. "Everyone will be talking." "Let them talk," she replied, squaring my shoulders in the mirror. "Just remember what your father always says. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business," I finished, smiling slightly at my father's favorite phrase. I should have listened to my first instinct and stayed home. Jason was there, of course, with Vanessa. She wore a backless red dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. They held court near the champagne fountain, surrounded by his colleagues from the law firm, her arm draped possessively through his. I made it through cocktail hour by sticking close to Olivia, my oldest friend, and the only person from our old social circle who hadn't quietly drifted away after the divorce. "You're doing great," she whispered, handing me a second glass of wine. "And you look beautiful." I almost believed her until dinner, when I discovered I'd been seated at a table directly in view of Jason and Vanessa. Whether this was an oversight by the planning committee or deliberate cruelty, I'll never know. But there I sat, pushing salmon around my plate, while watching my ex-husband feed his girlfriend bites of chocolate cake. Then came the moment that would become legendary in Oak Ridge gossip circles. As I stood in line for the ladies' room, overheard them, Stephanie Clark, Vanessa's maid of honor, though I didn't know it then, and 2 women I recognized from Jason's firm. "Poor Jason was practically dying in that marriage," Stephanie was saying, touching up her lipstick. "Becky was so suburban. All she talked about was yard work and school fundraisers." I froze in the doorway. "My name is Rebecca," I wanted to say. "I've never been Becky a day in my life." "Well, look at Vanessa. She's exactly his type. Sophisticated, ambitious. I heard they're already talking about rings." Honestly, he was too nice about the whole thing. Tom told me Jason's still paying for that house she lives in, plus alimony. If I were him, I'd have better boundaries. She needs to stand on her own 2 feet. Not true. I'd refused alimony. The house was all mine, and the mortgage too. I worked 60-hour weeks to make sure of it. The daughter seems a bit plain, doesn't she? Takes after her mom, I guess. Jason's so good with her, though. Vanessa was saying they're trying to expose her to more culture, get her interested in something besides soccer and those video games. My hands curled into fists. Emma was gifted. Straight A's, first chair violin, fluent in Spanish at 13. She played 1 video game, Minecraft, and only on weekends. These women knew nothing about my brilliant, sensitive daughter. The final blow came as I turned to leave, unable to bear another word. "Well, you know what Tom said Jason told him?" the third woman practically whispered, but not quietly enough. "He said Rebecca was great mother material, but awful wife material. Too practical, not enough passion. Vanessa is apparently quite the opposite. Mother material, not wife material." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As if they were different species of women. As if I hadn't been both, trying my hardest at each role for 15 years. I drove home in tears that night, grateful Emma was at a sleepover and couldn't see me fall apart. I sat in my car in the driveway for an hour, sobbing until my throat hurt. Then I walked into my house, past the dining room with its drafting table and landscaping samples, past Emma's room with her violin stand and soccer trophies, and into my bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. Mother material, not wife material. I examined my practical haircut, my makeup-free face, the wrinkles that had formed between my brows from concentrating on growth patterns and soil compositions, from raising a child, from building a life I thought would last forever. Something shifted in me that night, not in a grand cinematic way, but in the quiet way that fundamental changes often happen. I decided I was done letting other people define me. The next morning, I called Olivia. "I need a change," I said simply. 2 weeks later, I'd used a small portion of my savings to revamp my wardrobe. Nothing extravagant, just clothes that actually fit my new body and made me feel confident. I started a strength training program at the community center. I cut my hair into a sleek bob that framed my face better. Small changes, but they were for me, not for Jason or the gossips of Oak Ridge. At work, I pitched a community garden project to my boss, David, who was so impressed he promoted me to lead designer. The garden became my sanctuary, a place where growth and renewal weren't just metaphors but tangible outcomes of care and attention. Emma noticed the changes. She started spending more time in the garden with me, asking questions about the plants, helping me draft designs. Our weekday dinners became longer, less rushed, filled with actual conversation instead of the careful small talk we'd been subsisting on. "Dad says you seem different," she mentioned one evening as we planted spring bulbs in our small backyard. "Different how?" I asked, pressing tulip bulbs into the cool earth. She shrugged. "Just different. More like before. Before Jason, she meant. Before I became someone's wife, when I was just Rebecca. Passionate about creating beautiful spaces, focused on building my career in landscape architecture, before I detoured into the safer world of retail garden centers after Emma was born. I feel more like myself, I admitted. Is that okay with you?" She nodded, her eyes, so much like mine, serious. "I like it. I like when you laugh again." For nearly 6 months, things improved. Emma and I found our rhythm. My new position at work challenged and fulfilled me. The whispers around town didn't stop completely, but they affected me less. I was building something new, something that couldn't be shattered against a hardwood floor. Then the invitation arrived. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. "Jason Winters and Vanessa Taylor request the honor of your presence." A spring wedding at the Grand Oaks Resort, the same venue where Jason and I had celebrated our 10th anniversary just 3 years earlier. "Do we have to go?" Emma asked, quietly when I showed her. I looked at her carefully. "Do you want to go?" She bit her lip, a habit she'd had since childhood when she was thinking hard about something. "Dad said he really wants me there, and Vanessa's been nice lately." Nice. Such a small, inadequate word. I wanted to ask if Vanessa had been kind, if she had been thoughtful, if she had ever once considered what it might feel like for Emma to watch her father marry someone else just 18 months after leaving us. But I didn't. I was trying to be the bigger person, the good mother, the cooperative ex-wife. "Then we'll go," I said, forcing a smile. "We'll find you a beautiful dress." Emma frowned. "We? You're coming too?" I showed her the invitation again, pointing to where it clearly said, Rebecca Miller and Emma Miller. "Oh," Emma said, looking surprised. "Dad said he wasn't sure if you'd want to come." Of course I didn't want to come. What woman wants to watch her ex-husband marry the woman he left her for? But something in Emma's face told me she needed me there. So I nodded firmly. "I'll be right beside you." What followed were weeks of quiet dread. I lost sleep imagining walking into that resort, feeling everyone's eyes on me, hearing the whispers. Can you believe she came? So awkward. Poor thing probably still thinks she has a chance. But I was doing it for Emma. I found a dress, a deep emerald that brought out the green flecks in my blue eyes. I practiced my pleasant, unbothered expression in the mirror. I prepared neutral, polite responses to inevitable, uncomfortable questions. What I wasn't prepared for was the phone call from Jason a week before the wedding. About the ceremony, he said, his voice oddly hesitant. Vanessa and I were talking, and we thought it would be special if Emma did a reading. A reading? Yes, just a short poem about love and new beginnings. Vanessa found it. It's very tasteful. I gripped the phone tighter. Have you asked Emma if she wants to do this? Not yet. I thought I'd run it by you first, he replied, sounding pleased with himself for this small courtesy. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But this should be entirely Emma's decision. No pressure either way. Of course, he agreed quickly. I'll text her the poem so she can think about it. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling that my daughter was being used as a prop, the dutiful child blessing her father's new union. But I also knew that if I voiced this concern, I'd be labeled the bitter ex-wife, unable to move on, trying to sabotage Jason's happiness. When Emma came home from soccer practice, I casually mentioned the reading. Dad texted me about it, she said, dropping her cleats by the door despite my frequent reminders to put them in the mudroom. It's a weird poem. Weird how? She pulled out her phone and read aloud. When two souls find each other after long journeys apart, the universe rejoices at love's true start. I managed not to grimace. And how do you feel about reading it? Emma was quiet for a moment, scrolling through the text. Then she looked up at me with those searching eyes. Do I have to? Absolutely not, I said firmly. This is completely your choice. She nodded slowly. I'll think about it. The night before the wedding, Emma locked herself in her room for hours. I could hear her pacing, occasionally speaking in a low voice as if practicing something. When she finally emerged for dinner, her eyes were red-rimmed. Everything okay, sweetheart? I asked gently. Fine, she said, pushing pasta around her plate. Just nervous about tomorrow. About the reading? Did you decide? I'm going to do it, she interrupted. But I might change it a little. Is that okay? I hesitated. On one hand, I wanted to protect her from any fallout if she deviated from Vanessa's carefully selected poem. On the other hand, I believed in Emma's right to express herself, authentically. What did you have in mind? I asked. She shook her head. It's still about love and family and stuff. Just more real. More real. Those two words should have warned me, but I simply nodded and said, It's your voice, Em. Use it how you think is right. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed almost offensively cheerful given my mood. Emma was unusually quiet as we dressed and drove to the Grand Oaks Resort. She clutched a folded piece of paper in her hand, occasionally glancing at it and mouthing words to herself. The ceremony was set up on the resort's famous terrace overlooking the lake. White chairs with gold sashes, an obscene number of white roses, a string quartet playing softly. It was elegant, tasteful, and so utterly Vanessa that I almost laughed out loud. I recognized many of the guests, former friends, Jason's, colleagues, even some of our extended family members who had diplomatically maintained relationships with both of us. The pitying glances came exactly as I'd expected. I held my head high and guided Emma to our seats in the third row. Not family, but not quite ordinary guests either. Jason came over briefly before the ceremony began. He looked handsome in his tailored gray suit, but also nervous in a way I hadn't seen before. "Thanks for bringing her," he said quietly, nodding toward Emma, who was studying her paper intently. "And thank you for coming. I know it can't be easy." For a moment, the practiced polite responses fled my mind. All I could think was, "You have no idea what easy or hard is for me anymore. You gave up that right when you left." But I simply nodded and said, "Emma wanted me here." The ceremony began exactly on schedule. Vanessa appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm, looking undeniably beautiful in a sleek white gown that showcased her yoga-toned figure. Jason's face lit up when he saw her in a way that sent a dull pain through my chest. Had he ever looked at me like that? I couldn't remember anymore. The officiant, a justice of the peace rather than the pastor from our church, spoke about new beginnings and second chances in a way that felt pointed. I kept my face carefully neutral, even as I felt Olivia squeeze my hand from the seat beside me. After the vows, but before the final pronouncement, the officiant announced that the bride and groom had asked Jason's daughter to share a special reading. Emma rose from her seat beside me, unfolding her paper with shaking hands. I gave her an encouraging smile as she walked to the front. She stood before the gathered guests, looking small but determined in her blue dress. She glanced down at her paper, then up at the crowd, then over at her father and Vanessa. Then she took a deep breath and folded the paper back up, slipping it into her pocket. "I was going to read a poem that Vanessa picked out," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "It's about soulmates finding each other and the universe rejoicing. But last night, I realized that wouldn't be honest. And my mom always says that honesty matters more than making people comfortable." I felt the air leave my lungs. Beside me, Olivia gripped my hand harder. Emma continued, looking directly at her father now. "Dad, I love you. And I want you to be happy. But I need to say something first." The crowd was utterly silent. Jason's smile had frozen on his face. Vanessa looked like she was trying to communicate something to Emma with her eyes alone. "2 years ago, I heard you tell your friends that Mom was good mother material but terrible wife material. You were in the backyard, and I was getting a popsicle from the freezer. You laughed when you said it. Your friends laughed too." Gasps rippled through the audience. I felt my face flush with heat, not from embarrassment, but from a protective rage on behalf of my daughter who had been carrying this awful memory. "I didn't know what that meant then, but I do now," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. "It meant Mom was good enough to raise me, to help with my homework, to drive me to soccer, to hold me when I was sick. But she wasn't good enough to be loved by you forever like you promised." Jason took a step forward. "Emma, this isn't the place. No, please let me finish," she said firmly. "Because here's the thing I realized. Mom never stopped being either one. She's still the best mother, even when it's hard. And she would have been the best wife too, if you had let her. She still makes sure I have your favorite cookies when you pick me up for weekends. She still asks me if you're eating properly when you look tired. She never says anything bad about you, even when I can tell she's sad." My vision blurred with tears. I hadn't known Emma noticed any of those things. "So I'm not going to read a poem about soulmates," Emma said, squaring her shoulders. "Instead, I want to say that I hope you both are kind to each other. I hope you remember that promises matter. And mostly, I hope you know that Mom and I are okay. We're building something new, and it's beautiful." She paused, then added softly, "Congratulations, Dad and Vanessa. I really do hope you're happy. Together." Then she walked back down the aisle, past the rows of stunned guests, straight to me. She took my hand and whispered, "Can we go now?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We stood together and walked out, heads high as the murmurs began behind us. In the parking lot, safely inside our car, Emma finally broke down. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know you told me to be nice, but I couldn't read that poem. It felt like a lie. I gathered her in my arms, my amazing, brave daughter. Don't apologize. What you did in there was one of the most courageous things I've ever seen. Are you mad? She asked, wiping her eyes. Not at you, never at you. I started the car. Let's go get ice cream. We didn't talk about the wedding for the rest of that day. We got double scoops at our favorite ice cream shop, then went home and watched movies in our pajamas like we used to do when she was little. It wasn't until she was heading to bed that Emma asked, "Do you think Dad's really mad?" I considered this carefully. I think he's embarrassed, and I think he has some reflecting to do. Will he still want to see me on weekends? Of course he will, I assured her. You're his daughter. Nothing changes that. I was right about the embarrassment part. Jason called the next day, but surprisingly, not to complain or criticize. His voice sounded different, humbled maybe. "I owe you both an apology," he said after an awkward greeting. "Especially you, Rebecca." I never realized Emma had heard that. I never should have said it in the first place. "No, you shouldn't." "Have," I agreed, not making it easier for him. "It wasn't even true," he continued. "You were a great wife. The problems in our marriage were at least half my fault. Probably more. I just found it easier to blame you than look at myself." I sat down, unprepared for this moment of honesty after nearly 2 years of careful distance and frosty politeness. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "But I think Emma needs to hear it more than I do." "I know. I'm picking her up tomorrow. We're going to have a long talk." He paused. "For what it's worth, I admire how you've raised her. That kind of courage, speaking truth even when it's hard, that comes from you." After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, looking out at the garden Emma and I had planted together. The tulips were blooming, bright splashes of color against the dark earth. New life emerging from what had seemed barren. The whispers around town changed after that day. I still heard them sometimes at the grocery store or the coffee shop. But now they were different. Did you hear what Jason's daughter said at the wedding? Rebecca's garden designs won a regional award, did you see? Her daughter's got guts. Must take after her mother. It's been 8 months since the wedding. Emma still sees her father every other weekend, though their relationship has shifted into something more honest, more real. Jason and Vanessa are figuring out married life, which, as I know all too well, is never as simple as a perfect wedding day might suggest. As for me, I'm not just mother material anymore. I'm a landscape architect with my own small but growing business. I'm a mother to an incredible teenager who reminds me daily what courage looks like. I'm a daughter, a friend, a neighbor, a community garden organizer. And last month, when David from work finally worked up the nerve to ask me to dinner, I discovered I might be wife material again someday too. But only for someone who sees all of me, who knows that strength and vulnerability, practicality and passion aren't opposing forces, but the same powerful current running through a whole person. The whispers don't bother me anymore, because now I know that the most important voice to listen to is your own. And sometimes, when you're lucky, the voice of a brave daughter who refuses to let anyone diminish the people she loves, even if it means taking the microphone at a wedding and stunning everyone into silence. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever been reduced to a simple label or felt like your whole self wasn't being seen, remember this. Those who truly love you will see your completeness. Those who don't never deserved you in the first place. Thank you for listening to my story. Until tomorrow's special video, remember to stand in your truth, even when your voice shakes. After that day at the charity gala, something inside me shifted fundamentally. The words I'd overheard in the ladies' room, mother material but awful wife material, kept echoing in my mind during quiet moments. At night, after Emma went to sleep, I'd sit in my small backyard garden with a cup of tea, staring at the stars and wondering how 15 years of marriage could be reduced to such a cruel assessment. The garden had become my refuge in those difficult months. When we downsized to the townhouse, the backyard was nothing but patchy grass and a lonely concrete patio. Now it bloomed with carefully selected perennials, a small stone path, and a cozy seating area where Emma and I would sometimes have breakfast on weekend mornings. My hands in the soil felt like the only thing keeping me grounded as my former life dissolved around me. Jason's weekend visits with Emma became increasingly erratic as his relationship with Vanessa intensified. He'd cancel at the last minute because of surprise concert tickets or spontaneous weekend getaways, leaving Emma with a forced smile and me scrambling to create alternative plans so she wouldn't feel the sting of disappointment. "It's fine, Mom," she'd say, shrugging with that practiced indifference teenagers perfect so early. "Dad's just busy." But I'd catch her checking her phone repeatedly on those abandoned weekends, waiting for texts that often never came. Sometimes I'd find her sitting in her window seat late at night, staring out at the street as if willing his car to appear. One particularly difficult weekend, after Jason had promised to take Emma to the Science Museum in Hartford, but canceled because Vanessa had surprised him with tickets to a weekend spa retreat, I found Emma in her room, methodically removing the photos of her father from her bulletin board. "What are you doing, sweetie?" I asked, leaning against her doorframe. She didn't look up, just continued carefully unsticking the pushpins. "Making room for new stuff." I watched as she placed the photos in her desk drawer rather than throwing them away. Even in her hurt, she wasn't ready to discard him completely. "Want to do something tomorrow instead? Maybe drive to the coast? It's supposed to be nice." Emma finally looked up, her eyes, so disconcertingly similar to mine, tinged with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Not quite sadness, not quite anger. "Can we go to Lake George instead?" The question caught me off guard. Lake George had been our special place as a family. Jason's parents had a lakefront cabin there, and we'd spent every summer vacation at the lake until his parents sold the property 3 years ago. It was where Jason had proposed to me on a wooden dock under a sky full of stars. "Lake George?" I repeated, uncertain. "That's a longer drive, and we don't have the cabin anymore." "I know," Emma said, "but I just want to see it again. I barely remember what it looked like." Something in her voice made me agree, despite my reservations. The next morning, we packed a picnic and made the 3-hour drive north. Emma was unusually quiet during the journey, staring out the window with her earbuds in, occasionally writing something in the small leather journal she'd taken to carrying everywhere. Lake George was as beautiful as I remembered. The water crystal clear, the surrounding mountains lush with early summer greenery. We found a public beach area not far from where the family cabin had been. As we spread our blanket on the sand, I couldn't help but scan the shoreline, half expecting to see ghosts of our former selves. Jason teaching 5-year-old Emma to swim, me reading under an umbrella, our younger, intact family preserved in this place like insects in amber. "Is that it?" Emma asked suddenly, pointing to a blue-gray cabin visible through the trees on a nearby point. "No, our cabin was further around the bend," I said. "We can't see it from here." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this information. We ate our sandwiches and fruit, took a short swim in the still cold water, and walked along the shore collecting interesting stones. It was a pleasant day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma had some purpose in coming here that she wasn't sharing. As we were packing up to leave, she finally spoke what was on her mind. "Dad proposed to you here, right?" I nearly dropped the thermos I was packing. "Yes, on the dock at sunset." "What did he say? When he asked you?" I hesitated, unsure why she was asking and whether answering would cause her more pain. But I'd promised myself after the divorce that I would always be honest with Emma, even when it was difficult. He said that I made him feel like his best self, and that he couldn't imagine growing old without me. The memory was still clear, despite everything that had happened since. He said he wanted to build a family with me, a life where we faced everything together. Emma digested this information, frowning slightly. But then he left. It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. Just folded our picnic blanket carefully, matching corner to corner the way my mother had taught me. "Do you think he'll say the same things to Vanessa?" Emma asked, her voice smaller now. I took a deep breath, looking out over the lake that had witnessed so many chapters of our family story. "I don't know, Em. Maybe. People often make the same promises, even when they've broken them before." "That's sad," she said simply. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." On the drive home, Emma fell asleep, her journal clutched to her chest. I wondered what she was writing. In there, what thoughts and feelings my introspective daughter was processing on her own. I'd always tried to maintain an open relationship with her, but the divorce had created new territory for both of us. Unfamiliar emotional landscapes we were learning to navigate separately as well as together. When we arrived home, there were 3 missed calls from Jason on my phone. I waited until Emma was in the shower before calling him back. "Where were you?" he demanded, skipping any greeting. "I've been trying to reach Emma all day." "We went to Lake George," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Emma wanted to visit." A strange silence followed. "Lake George? Why would you take her there?" "She asked to go. She wanted to see it again." Another pause. "Well, I need to talk to her. I want to make up for canceling yesterday. I'm thinking I'll take her to New York next weekend. There's a Broadway show Vanessa can get tickets for." "I'll tell her to call you when she's out of the shower," I said, not committing to his plan. "But Jason, maybe instead of big makeup gestures, you could try just keeping the regular plans you make with her." "Don't tell me how to parent my daughter," he snapped, the familiar defensive edge creeping into his voice. "Just because she lives with you doesn't mean you get to make all the decisions." I bit back a retort about who was really making the parenting decisions when he regularly canceled his time with Emma. Instead, I said quietly, "She put your photos in her desk drawer today." That silenced him. "What do you mean?" "She took down all the pictures of you from her bulletin board. She said she was making room for new things, but I thought you should know." When he spoke again, his voice had lost its defensive edge. "Is she really upset about the museum?" "It's not about the museum, Jason. It's about the pattern. She notices when she's not the priority." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, thinking about priorities and promises, about Emma taking down those photos, about her questions at the lake. She was trying to make sense of her father's choices, trying to reconcile the man who had promised forever with the man who had left. I wasn't sure I had made sense of it myself. The next morning, I woke early and went into the garden, pulling weeds with perhaps more vigor than necessary. Gardening had become my therapy, the only place where effort reliably yielded results, where care visibly mattered. I was on my knees, hands deep in the soil around a lavender plant, when I sensed Emma watching me from the patio door. "Morning, early bird," I called, sitting back on my heels. "Want to help? I could use a hand with these lavender transplants." She padded out in her pajamas and bare feet, hair still mussed from sleep. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you lonely?" The question caught me completely off guard. I brushed soil from my hands, buying time to formulate an answer. "What makes you ask that?" Emma shrugged, picking at a loose thread on her sleep shirt. "Just, you're always either working or with me. You don't go on dates or have people over except Olivia sometimes." I patted the garden bench beside me, and she came to sit down. "There's a difference between being alone and being lonely," I said carefully. "Yes, sometimes I miss having a partner, but I'm not unhappy, Emma. Dad says you work too much, that you always did." I felt a flicker of irritation. Was Jason discussing our marriage with our 13-year-old? I work to support us and because I enjoy it. The garden center job pays our bills, and my design. Work makes me feel creative and fulfilled. But don't you want someone to love you? She persisted. The question pierced something tender in me. Of course I wanted someone to love me. Everyone did. But I had spent the past 18 months focusing on rebuilding our life, on making sure Emma felt secure, on finding my footing as a single mother. Dating had seemed like a distant concern, something for some future version of myself who wasn't, just trying to stay afloat. I have you, I said, smiling at her, and that's quite a lot of love. She rolled her eyes but smiled back. You know what I mean? I do. And yes, someday I hope to have that kind of love again. But right now, I'm focusing on us, on my work, on building a life that feels good even if it's different from what I expected. Emma seemed to consider this, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she said, Vanessa told me she and Dad are getting married. My hands stilled in my lap. Oh? When did she tell you that? Last weekend when Dad canceled. She called me to apologize for the spa thing, said they needed a weekend away to talk about their future. But then she said they were thinking fall for the wedding, and did I think that was a good season? The casual way Vanessa had dropped this bomb to my daughter made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. How do you feel about that? Emma shrugged again, but I could see the gesture wasn't as nonchalant as she wanted it to appear. Whatever, it's not like it changes anything. They already live together. But it did change things, and we both knew it. A wedding meant permanence. It meant Vanessa officially becoming Emma's stepmother. It meant Jason rebuilding the family he had dismantled, but with someone else in my place. It's okay to have complicated feelings about it, I told her gently. You can be happy for your dad, but also sad or angry or confused at the same time. I just don't get it, Emma said, her voice rising slightly. He made promises to you too. How can he make the same promises to her? Doesn't that make them, I don't know, worth less? I had no good answer for this. It was the same question I had asked myself many sleepless nights. I think, I said slowly, that your dad believes he'll keep his promises this time. People usually don't make promises planning to break them. But he did break them. He broke our whole family. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I pulled her into a hug, feeling her thin shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. I know, sweetheart, I know. We sat like that for a long time, the morning sun warming our shoulders, the scent of lavender rising around us. I wished I could protect her from this pain, but I knew it was something she had to move through. All I could do was hold her while she did. Later that day, Jason called to officially tell me about the engagement. He sounded cautious, as if expecting me to be upset. Vanessa and I are getting married in October, he said. I wanted you to hear it from me. Emma already told me, I replied. Vanessa called her last weekend. A pause. Well, we'd like Emma to be part of the ceremony. Maybe as a junior bridesmaid or something. I closed my eyes, counting, to 5 silently before responding. That should be Emma's decision, don't you think? Of course, he said quickly. I just wanted to run it by you first. I appreciate that. I hesitated, then added, Jason, she's struggling with this. Not the wedding specifically, but with understanding how you can make the same commitments again when you broke them the first time. She might need some time. He was quiet for so long I thought we'd lost the connection. Finally, he said, I never meant to hurt her, Rebecca, or you for that matter. I just wasn't happy. The simple admission hung between us. I had known, of course. I had seen him growing distant, irritable, restless in the year before he left. But hearing him say it out loud still stung. I hope you're happy now, I said, and was surprised to find I mostly meant it. Not because I wished him particularly, but because Emma deserved a father who wasn't miserable, who didn't resent his life or the people in it. I am, he said softly. Vanessa understands me. The implication being that I hadn't, but rather than rise to the bait, I just said, "Good. I'll talk to Emma about the junior bridesmaid thing, but no pressure from your end, okay? She needs to feel like she has a choice." After hanging up, I wandered into the garden again, needing the solace of growing things. I found myself thinking about Jason's words. Vanessa understands me. Had I ever really understood him? Had he understood me? We had been so young when we met. Me just out of college, him 3 years into his law career. We had grown up together in many ways, but perhaps we had also grown apart without realizing it. The wedding planning moved forward over the summer. Vanessa selected the Grand Oaks Resort, an upscale venue with manicured grounds and a picturesque lake view. I knew because Emma showed me the photos on Vanessa's Instagram, elaborate floral arrangements, table settings, dress fittings. Vanessa had apparently created a special wedding account and was documenting every detail of the planning process. "It's like she's putting on a show," Emma commented one evening as we scrolled through the latest posts. "Look at this cake tasting." One, who takes professional photos of tasting cake samples? I had to admit it did seem excessive, but I tried to be diplomatic. Some people just really enjoy the planning process. The details matter to them. Emma looked thoughtful. "Did you do all this stuff for your wedding?" "Not to this extent," I admitted with a small smile. "Your dad and I had a much simpler ceremony. We got married in the church I grew up in, had the reception in my parents' backyard. Your grandmother and her friends did most of the flowers." "That sounds nice," Emma said. "More real." The word caught me. Real. Was that how our wedding had felt? Real? I remembered the slight tremble in Jason's hands as he slipped the ring on my finger, the way my father had cried during his toast, the wildflowers in mismatched jars on the reception tables. It had been beautiful in its imperfection, genuine in a way that Instagram-perfect weddings perhaps couldn't be. It was real, I agreed. It was us, at that time in our lives. Emma eventually agreed to be in the wedding, though she declined the junior bridesmaid role. She would instead do a reading during the ceremony, a compromise that seemed to satisfy everyone. Jason sent over the poem Vanessa had selected, something saccharine about two souls finding each other after long journeys apart. Emma read it, out loud at our kitchen table with a raised eyebrow. "Subtle," she commented dryly. "It's basically saying, 'Sorry I dumped my first wife, but you're my real soulmate.'" "Emma," I admonished, though I had thought much the same thing. "You don't have to do the reading if it makes you uncomfortable." She shook her head. "No, it's fine. It's just a poem, and Dad really wants me to do it." As the wedding date approached, I noticed Emma spending more time in her room, door closed, often writing in her journal. She seemed preoccupied, sometimes almost secretive. When I asked if everything was okay, she would just nod and say she was working on something. For school, though school was still several weeks away from starting. One night, about 2 weeks before the wedding, I passed her bedroom on my way to the laundry room and heard her speaking in a low, measured voice. I paused, not wanting to eavesdrop, but concerned by her serious tone. It sounded as if she was practicing a speech, though I couldn't make out the words. I knocked gently. "Emma, can I come in?" The speaking stopped abruptly. "Just a second." After some rustling noises, she opened the door, slightly flushed. "What's up?" "Just checking if you have any laundry," I said, looking past her to the suspiciously clean room. Emma was not known for her tidiness. "Nope, all good," she said quickly, already starting to close the door. "Are you sure everything's okay?" I asked. "You've been pretty quiet lately." She hesitated, then said, I'm just thinking about stuff, the wedding and everything. Do you want to talk about it? Another hesitation. Not yet, but maybe soon. I didn't push, though my maternal instincts were sending warning signals. Emma had always been introspective, but this felt different, more deliberate, as if she was preparing for something. The week before the wedding brought a flurry of last-minute details. Emma needed final dress alterations. I found myself hunting for the right shoes to go with my own carefully selected outfit, a deep blue dress that Olivia assured me struck the perfect balance between dignified and attractive. I had decided early on that I wouldn't play the role of pathetic ex-wife at this wedding. I would hold my head high, support my daughter, and show everyone in attendance that I had rebuilt my life into something I was proud of. 3 days before the ceremony, Emma and I were having dinner when she suddenly put down her fork and said, "Mom, can I ask you something serious?" "Of course," I replied, instantly alert to her tone. "If you could say one thing to Dad about everything that happened, what would it be?" I blinked, startled by the directness of the question. "That's quite a hypothetical." "Just one thing," she pressed. "The most important thing." I considered the question carefully, aware that my answer mattered to her for reasons I didn't fully understand. There were so many things I could say to Jason. Angry things, hurt things, practical things about co-parenting. But looking at my daughter's earnest face, I decided on honesty. I would tell him that breaking promises doesn't just hurt the person you made them to. It ripples outward and affects everyone who believed in those promises, especially children. And that trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. Emma nodded slowly, as if my answer confirmed something she'd been thinking. "That's good. That's really good." "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, returning to her food. "Just wondering." That night, I heard her practicing her speech again, her voice rising and falling behind her closed door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, wrestling with the urge to intervene, to ask what she was really planning. But something held me back. Emma had always been thoughtful and kind-hearted, even through the worst of the divorce. I needed to trust that whatever she was preparing for, she would handle it with the same integrity she'd shown throughout this difficult journey. The day before the wedding, Jason picked up Emma for the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited, which was fine by me. I used the evening to tend my garden, finishing a new rock border I'd been working on. Physical labor helped quiet my mind, which was buzzing with anxieties about the next day. How I would feel seeing Jason say vows to another woman, how the other guests would look at me, whether Emma would be okay. When Jason dropped Emma home, that night she seemed subdued. I waited until she was ready for bed before perching on the edge of her mattress, smoothing her hair back from her forehead the way I had done since she was small. "How was the rehearsal?" She sighed. "Fine. Lots of Vanessa's friends getting drunk and being loud. Vanessa's mom kept introducing me as Jason's daughter from his starter marriage." I winced. "That's unkind." "Yeah, Dad didn't hear her say it, or at least he pretended not to." Emma picked at a thread on her comforter. "The wedding planner kept telling me where to stand and when to do the reading. She treats me like I'm 6, not 13. Just one day to get through," I reminded her gently. "Then things will settle into a new normal." Emma looked up at me, her eyes suddenly fierce. "I don't want a new normal. I liked our old normal. I liked when it was just us 3. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. "I know, sweetheart. I did too. But sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and we have to find ways to be happy within the new circumstances." "Like you did with the garden," she said, "making something beautiful out of what you didn't choose." Her insight startled me. "Yes, exactly like that." She nodded, seeming satisfied with this comparison. "I'm going to be okay tomorrow, Mom. I know exactly what I'm going to do." Something in her tone made me pause. Emma, about the reading. Don't worry, she interrupted. I'm not going to do anything to embarrass you. That's not what I'm worried about, I said carefully. I just want to make sure you're not putting yourself in a difficult position. It's okay to just read the poem and get through the day. Emma's expression was unreadable in the dim light of her bedside lamp. I need to do this my way, Mom. I need to say what's true for me. Studied her face, seeing the determination there. In that moment, she looked so much like me, the stubborn set of her jaw, the clear-eyed conviction. But I also saw Jason in her, his unflinching directness, his ability to cut to the heart of a matter. Whatever she was planning, I realized, was coming from both parts of her heritage. Okay, I said finally. I trust you. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mild, perfect October weather, with just enough crispness in the air to make the changing leaves seem especially vibrant. Emma was unusually quiet as we dressed and drove to the Grand Oaks Resort. She clutched a folded paper in her hand, the poem, I assumed, occasionally glancing at it with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. The venue was as impressive as the Instagram posts had suggested. The ceremony was set up on a manicured lawn overlooking the lake, white chairs arranged in neat rows, an elaborate floral arch marking the altar area. Staff in crisp uniforms directed guests, while a string quartet played softly in the background. It was tasteful, elegant, and honestly a bit intimidating in its perfection. I recognized many of the guests as we took our seats, former friends, Jason's colleagues, even some extended family members who had diplomatically maintained relationships with both of us. The pitying glances came exactly as I'd expected. I held my head high and guided Emma to our seats in the third row. Not family, but not quite ordinary guests either. Jason came over briefly before the ceremony began. He looked handsome in his tailored gray suit, but also nervous in a way I hadn't seen before. Thanks for bringing her, he said quietly, nodding toward Emma, who was intently studying her paper. And thank you for coming. I know it can't be easy. For a moment, all my carefully rehearsed polite responses abandoned me. All I could think was, you have no idea what easy or hard is for me anymore. You gave up that right when you left. But I simply nodded and said, Emma wanted me here. It was the truth, and it was enough. The ceremony began exactly on schedule. Vanessa was undeniably beautiful in her sleek white gown, her blonde hair arranged in an elaborate updo adorned with tiny white flowers. Jason's face lit up when he saw her, and I felt a dull ache in my chest. Had he ever looked at me like that? I couldn't remember anymore. The officiant spoke about new beginnings and second chances in a way that felt pointed. I kept my face carefully neutral, grateful for Olivia's steady presence beside me. After the exchange of vows, but before the final pronouncement, the officiant announced that the bride and groom had invited Jason's daughter to share a special reading. Emma rose from her seat, her face composed but determined. She walked to the front with measured steps, unfolding her paper as she took her place beside the officiant. She glanced down at the paper, then up at the assembled guests, then over at her father and Vanessa. Then she took a deep breath, refolded the paper, and slipped it into her pocket. I was going to read the poem Vanessa chose, she began, her voice clear and steady. It's about soulmates finding each other after long journeys. But I realized that wouldn't be honest, and my mom always says that honesty matters more than making people comfortable. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Beside me, Olivia reached for my hand. Dad, Emma continued, looking directly at Jason, I love you, and I want you to be happy. But I need to say something first. 2 summers ago, Emma continued, her voice gaining strength, I was getting a popsicle from the freezer when I heard Dad in the backyard with his friends. He told them that Mom was good mother material but terrible wife material. They all laughed like it was funny. A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the wedding guests. Jason's face drained. Of color. Vanessa's perfect smile faltered. I didn't understand what that meant then, Emma said. But I do now. It meant Mom was good enough to raise me, to make my lunches, to hold me when I was sick, to help me with my science projects. But she wasn't good enough for Dad to keep his promises to. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. I wanted to stand, to stop her, to protect her from the aftermath of such raw honesty in such a public setting. But another part of me, the part that had swallowed so much pain in silence, remained rooted to my seat, watching my daughter speak the truth we had both been living. The thing is, Emma continued, her gaze steady on her father, Mom never stopped being either one. She still makes sure there are your favorite cookies when you pick me up for weekends. She still asks if you're eating properly when you look tired. She never says anything bad about you, even when I can see she's sad. Jason took a half step forward, his hand reaching out as if to stop her. Emma, this isn't... Please let me finish, she said, with a quiet authority that stopped him mid-sentence. I'm not saying this to hurt you or to ruin your wedding. I'm saying it because promises should matter, and because I need everyone here to know that my mom never failed at anything. She just loved someone who didn't love her back the same way. The silence in the garden was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Vanessa's perfectly manicured hand gripped Jason's arm, her knuckles white. So I'm not going to read a poem about soulmates, Emma said, squaring her shoulders. Instead, I want to say that I hope you both remember that promises are sacred things. They're not just words you say to get what you want in the moment. They're commitments that shape people's lives and hearts. She paused, her eyes moving from her father to Vanessa. I hope you're kind to each other. I hope you remember that every choice you make affects more people than just yourselves. She took a deep breath, and then, with a gentleness that brought tears to my eyes, added, and I want you to know that Mom and I are okay. We're building something new, and it's beautiful in its own way. We don't need anyone's pity. Emma carefully refolded her paper and slipped it back into her pocket. Congratulations, Dad and Vanessa. I really do hope you find happiness together. Then she walked back down the aisle, past the rows of stunned guests, straight to me. She took my hand and whispered, Can we go now? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. We stood together and walked toward the exit, heads high, as the murmurs began behind us. I was vaguely aware of Olivia following us, of Jason calling Emma's name, of the wedding planner frantically whispering to the officiant. But all that truly registered was the warm pressure of my daughter's hand in mine, and the straight line of her spine as we walked away from a moment that would forever mark our lives. In the parking lot, safely inside our car, Emma finally broke. Her shoulders slumped and tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you told me to just read the poem, but I couldn't. It felt like a lie. I gathered her in my arms across the center console, my amazing, brave, truthful daughter. Don't apologize. What you did in there was one of the most courageous things I've ever seen. Are you mad? She asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Not at you. Never at you. I started the car. Let's go get ice cream. We drove to Parkside Creamery, Emma's favorite dessert spot since she was small. We didn't speak about the wedding, just ordered double scoops. Coffee with chocolate chips for me, mint chocolate chip for her, and sat at a table by the window, watching families and couples stroll by in the autumn sunshine, blissfully unaware of the emotional earthquake we had just experienced. Do you think Dad's really mad? Emma finally asked, pushing the last bite of ice cream around her cup. I considered this carefully. I think he's embarrassed, and I think he has some reflecting to do. Will he still want to see me on weekends? The question broke my heart. That, after everything, her first worry was still about losing her father's love. Of course he will, I assured her. You're his daughter. Nothing changes that. Even when I embarrass him in front of all his fancy friends? Even then, I said firmly. Besides, you didn't embarrass him. You spoke your truth. There's a difference. Emma seemed to consider this, tilting her head in that thoughtful way she had. Vanessa's mom looked like she was going to explode. Despite everything, I couldn't help but smile at the image. I imagine quite a few people looked that way. Olivia was smiling, though. I saw her when I walked back. That's because Olivia loves us, I explained. And because sometimes it feels good to hear the truth spoken aloud after so much silence. We finished our ice cream and drove home, both emotionally exhausted. Emma disappeared into her room while I puttered around the kitchen, not really accomplishing anything. My mind replaying the moment Emma had stood before all those people and spoken words that had lived in both our hearts for so long. Part of me worried about the repercussions. Would Jason be angry enough to fight for full custody? Would Emma be ostracized by Jason's side of the family? Would the Oak Ridge gossip mill paint her as a troubled child, or me as the bitter ex-wife who had put her up to it? Another part of me felt an unexpected lightness, as if a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. The truth was out now. We couldn't take it back, but maybe we didn't need to. I was loading the dishwasher when my phone rang. Jason's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. Rebecca. His voice sounded strained, almost unrecognizable. Jason, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Where's Emma? Is she okay? She's in her room. She's fine. A long pause followed. I could hear muffled voices in the background. The wedding guests, I assumed, still trying to process what had happened. Did you know? He finally asked. Did you know she was going to do that? No, I answered honestly. I knew she was. Struggling with the reading, but I had no idea what she planned to say. Another pause. She heard me say that? About you being what she said I said? Apparently so. God. His voice cracked slightly. I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have said it, or wouldn't have said it where she could hear? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Both. Neither. I don't know. He sounded genuinely distraught. Is she willing to talk to me? I need to explain. I glanced toward Emma's closed door. That's up to her. I'm not going to force her to talk to you right now. Rebecca, please. There was a desperation in his voice I'd rarely heard. The ceremony is on hold. Everyone's just sitting here waiting. I need to fix this. Some things can't be fixed with one conversation, Jason. Some things take time and consistent effort to repair. I know that. He sounded frustrated now. But I need to start somewhere. Please, just ask her if she'll talk to me. I sighed, then walked to Emma's door and knocked softly. Em, your dad's on the phone. He'd like to talk to you. It's completely your choice. There was a long silence, then the sound of movement. Emma opened the door, her eyes red but dry now. Okay, she said quietly. I handed her the phone and retreated to the kitchen to give her privacy. But I could still hear her side of the conversation. Hi, Dad. A long pause. No, Mom didn't know. Another pause. Because it was true. I needed to say what was true. Her voice wobbled slightly. I know it was your special day. I'm sorry for that part, but not for what I said. I busied myself wiping down already clean counters, my heart aching for her, for the burden of honesty she had taken upon herself. No, I don't hate you, she said, her voice softer now. I love you. That's why it hurts so much when you're not who I thought you were. Another pause, longer this time. I don't know. I need some time. Then, okay, bye. She came into the kitchen and handed me back the phone, her expression unreadable. He's going to continue with the wedding. she said. "He said to tell you he's sorry. For everything." "How do you feel?" I asked carefully. She shrugged, in that universal teenage gesture that could mean anything from mild annoyance to profound distress. "Tired? Can we just watch movies or something?" "Absolutely." We spent the rest of that surreal day on the couch, working our way through Emma's favorite comfort films, the Harry Potter series, starting from the beginning. We ordered pizza, stayed in our pajamas, and didn't discuss the wedding or Jason or Vanessa. It was as if we both needed this pocket of normalcy, this familiar ritual of cheese and wizards and mother-daughter closeness, before facing whatever would come next. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Olivia called. "You okay?" she asked without preamble. "I think so," I replied, curling up in my favorite chair by the window. "Still processing." "It was quite a scene," she said. "After you left." Jason and Vanessa went inside for about 20 minutes. There was a lot of confused milling around by the guests. Then they came back out. The officiant did a very abbreviated version of the ceremony, and that was that. Half the guests had left by then. "So, they did get married." "They did, though I've rarely seen a less joyful wedding." She paused. "You should know that a lot of people were talking about how poised Emma was, how articulate. Some of Jason's colleagues' wives were saying she must get that from you." I smiled despite myself. "Small consolation." "Not so small," Olivia countered. "Perceptions are shifting, Beck. You're not just poor Rebecca anymore. You're the woman raising an incredibly self-possessed young woman who speaks hard truths with compassion." After we hung up, I sat for a long time looking out at my garden in the moonlight. The mums were in full bloom, their deep russet and gold colors visible even in the dim light. I thought about growth and seasons, about words spoken and unspoken, about the courage it takes to plant something new, not knowing if it will thrive. The days that followed were oddly quiet. I had expected more immediate fallout. Angry calls from Jason, gossip reaching my ears at work, perhaps even confrontations from his or Vanessa's family members. Instead, there was a strange lull, as if everyone involved needed time to digest what had happened. Emma returned to school on Monday, bracing herself for questions or comments about the wedding, but apparently neither Jason nor Vanessa had shared the details with many people, because Emma reported that only her closest friend Lily had asked about it, and only because Lily's mother had been a guest. "I just told her it was complicated," Emma said with a shrug as we drove home from soccer practice. "She didn't push." "That was kind of her," I remarked. "Yeah, she's a good friend." Emma was quiet for a moment, then added, "Ms. Chen, Lily's mom, told her she was proud of me for standing up for what I believed in." I glanced over, surprised. Angela Chen was one of the most traditional, proper women in Oak Ridge. "She said that?" Emma nodded. "Lily said her mom has been through some stuff too, with Lily's dad, so she gets it." It hadn't occurred to me that Angela might have her own history of heartbreak hidden behind her perfect outfits and meticulous manners. It was a reminder that everyone has depths we don't see, pain we don't recognize unless we've experienced something similar ourselves. 3 days after the wedding, I was deadheading late-blooming roses in my garden when a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Jason's Tesla, sleek and silent. I straightened up, pruning shears still in hand, watching as he sat behind the wheel for a long moment before finally emerging. He looked different, exhausted, rumpled in a way the old Jason would never have allowed himself to appear in public. He approached hesitantly, stopping at the edge of the garden rather than coming all the way to where I stood. "Rebecca?" he said, his voice oddly formal. "Is Emma home?" "No, she's at violin lesson. Margaret Wilson picks her up on Wednesdays, remember?" He nodded absently. "Right, of course." He glanced around the garden, taking in the neat beds, the rock borders, the small fountain I'd installed over the summer. "This looks amazing. You've done a lot with the space." Thank you. I waited, uncertain why he was really here. He cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not just the pathetic sorry I asked Emma to relay. I set down my shears and pulled off my gardening gloves. I'm listening. What Emma said at the wedding about hearing me say you were mother material but not wife material. I said that. I can't deny it. But I want you to know it wasn't true. It was never true. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. I was trying to justify leaving, to make myself feel better about breaking my promises. So I created this narrative where you were somehow lacking. As a wife, where Vanessa was somehow more of what I needed. And was she? I couldn't help asking. More of what you needed? He looked away. I thought so at the time. Now I'm not so sure about anything. Did you still get married after we left? Yes. He met my eyes again. We did. It seemed like the only option at that point, with everyone there, all the plans made. I nodded, unsurprised. Jason had always cared deeply about appearances, about following through on what was expected. Vanessa's barely speaking to me, he continued. She says I humiliated her, that I should have prepared Emma better, that this is all my fault for not making a clean enough break from my previous life. He made air quotes around the last two words, his expression bitter. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. No one deserved to start a marriage in such turmoil. Don't be. Emma was right. About the promises, about how choices affect more than just the people making them. He took a tentative step closer. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. About what kind of person I've become. What kind of father I've been. And I'm not proud of what I see. His voice cracked slightly. I made so many mistakes, Rebecca. I hurt you. I hurt Emma. I betrayed everything I claimed to believe in about commitment and family. All because I was bored, or restless, or having some kind of midlife crisis at 39. There was a time when his admission would have meant everything to me, when I would have rushed to comfort him, to assure him he wasn't as bad as he feared. But that time had passed. I had built a new life brick by brick, one that didn't revolve around cushioning Jason's feelings or ego. What do you want from me, Jason? I asked quietly. Absolution? That's not mine to give. He shook his head. No, I don't expect that from you. I need to know if you think Emma will ever forgive me. If there's anything I can do to rebuild what I've broken with her. The question caught me off guard. Of all the things he might have come here seeking, concern for his relationship with Emma seemed the most genuine, the most worthy of a thoughtful response. Emma loves you, I said finally. That's never been in question. But she needs time. And she needs to see real change, not just hear words of remorse. What kind of change? Consistency, for one thing. Not canceling plans with her when something more exciting comes up. Being present when you're with her, not constantly checking your phone or talking about work. Respecting her feelings even when they're inconvenient for you. I paused, gathering my thoughts. And she needs honesty. Real honesty, not the sanitized version of events you think she can handle. He nodded slowly. I can do that. I want to do that. Then you have a chance, I said. Emma has an enormous capacity for forgiveness, but she's also watching closely now, more aware than she was before. She'll notice if your actions don't match your words. He looked around the garden again, his gaze lingering on a small stone bench where Emma and I often sat in the evenings. You've created something beautiful here, he said softly. A real home. I should have seen that before. As he turned to leave, he hesitated. For what it's worth, Rebecca, you were never the problem in our marriage. I was. And I'm sorry it took our daughter standing up at my wedding for me to admit that. After he drove away, I returned to my roses, methodically, removing spent blooms to encourage new growth. Jason's visit had stirred feelings I thought I had put to rest. Not longing or regret exactly, but a wistfulness for what might have been if he had come to these realizations years ago, before breaking our family apart. But that was the thing. About realizations I reflected as I worked. They rarely came when they were most useful. They tended to arrive after damage was done, after paths had diverged, after new seeds had been planted and begun to grow in separate gardens. Emma was subdued when she came home from violin, disappearing into her room to practice a difficult passage her teacher had assigned. I didn't mention Jason's visit, wanting to give her space to process everything at her own pace. But at dinner, she surprised me by bringing him up herself. Did Dad seem weird at the wedding? Before I did my speech thing, I mean. I considered the question, trying to recall Jason's demeanor that day beyond my own nervous awareness of him. A little tense? Maybe. Why? She pushed her pasta around her plate. I don't know. When I saw him at the rehearsal dinner, he kept looking at me like he was trying to figure something out, and he kept checking his phone when Vanessa wasn't watching. Cold feet, maybe, I suggested. Getting married is a big step, even the second time around. Emma nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. He seemed sad too, not just nervous. I wasn't sure what to say to that. I didn't want to project my own interpretations onto Jason's emotions, especially not to Emma, who was already carrying too much of the weight of adult complexities. People feel all sorts of things at weddings, I said carefully. Joy, fear, nostalgia, doubt, sometimes all at the same time. Did you feel that way at your wedding? To Dad? The question caught me off guard. Emma rarely asked about our wedding or early marriage. I was nervous, I admitted, and excited, and very sure that I loved your father and wanted to build a life with him. Were you scared it wouldn't work out? I shook my head. Not really. I believed completely in the promises we were making. I couldn't imagine a future where they wouldn't hold. Emma was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. That must have made it harder, when they didn't. Yes, I said softly. It did. She nodded, as if confirming something to herself. I think Dad was scared at his wedding to Vanessa. Not just normal nervous. Actually scared. I didn't know how to respond to that insightful observation from my 13-year-old. Was it possible that Jason, even as he went through with his wedding to Vanessa, had been harboring doubts? And if so, what did that mean? For Emma, caught between two households, one just forming and possibly already faltering? Whatever your dad was feeling, I said carefully, it doesn't change his love for you, and it doesn't change our family, you and me, and what we've built here. Emma seemed to accept this, returning to her dinner with a bit more appetite. Later that evening, as she was getting ready for bed, her phone chimed with a message. She checked it, her expression flickering between surprise and something like relief. Dad wants to take me to breakfast on Saturday, she said. Just the two of us. No Vanessa. How do you feel about that? I asked, folding laundry on her bed. She shrugged, but I could tell she was pleased. Good, I guess. He says he wants to talk. Really talk, not just surface stuff. That sounds like a positive step, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral despite my inner skepticism. Jason had made similar overtures before, only to revert to his distracted, detached parenting style within weeks. Yeah, Emma agreed, though I could hear a note of caution in her voice as well. We'll see. The breakfast meeting must have gone better than either of us expected, because Emma returned home with a lighter step and a tentative smile. She didn't share the details of their conversation, and I didn't pry, but she mentioned that they had plans to visit the Science Museum the following weekend. the trip he had canceled months ago for Vanessa's spa retreat. He apologized, she said simply when I expressed surprise. He said he's trying to do better. I'm glad, I replied, and meant it. Whatever had happened between Jason and me, Emma deserved a father who recognized his mistakes and worked to repair them. The weeks that followed brought subtle but noticeable changes. Jason became more consistent with his weekends, more engaged when he had Emma. He started showing up to her soccer games regularly, something he'd been sporadic about since the divorce. Once, I even spotted him taking notes during her parent-teacher conference, a level of involvement he'd previously left entirely to me. Vanessa, on the other hand, began to fade from the picture. She stopped accompanying Jason to Emma's events. Emma mentioned that she was traveling for work during several of her weekend visits to Jason's. By Thanksgiving, the whispers around town had shifted yet again. I heard they're in counseling, Olivia reported over coffee at Morning Brew one crisp November day. Jason and Vanessa. Apparently, the wedding debacle was just the beginning of their problems. I sipped my latte, not entirely comfortable discussing my ex-husband's new marriage, even with my closest friend. I hope they work things out, for everyone's sake. Olivia gave me a searching look. You really mean that, don't you? After everything he put you through, you still wish him well. I considered this. Did I truly want Jason and Vanessa to succeed? Or was I just saying what seemed mature and appropriate? I want him to be stable and happy, I finally said. For Emma's sake, yes, but also because carrying bitterness is exhausting. I did it for too long. I'm ready to let it go. Olivia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're remarkable, you know that? Most women would be secretly gleeful at their ex's second marriage hitting rocks so quickly. I smiled ruefully. Maybe I'm just too tired for schadenfreude. Or maybe I've learned that other people's unhappiness never really fills the holes in your own life. The truth was, I had been filling those holes myself, one small satisfaction at a time. My landscape design business had grown enough that I was considering reducing my hours at the garden center to focus on it more fully. My garden had become a source of not just personal joy, but community connection, as neighbors stopped to admire it and ask for advice. And Emma and I had found a new rhythm together, a mother-daughter bond strengthened rather than weakened by the challenges we'd faced. As Christmas approached, our second holiday season since the divorce, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in a year. Last Christmas had been raw, the wound of Jason's departure still fresh, his absence from our traditions palpably painful. Emma had moved between our homes like a little ghost, trying so hard to maintain holiday cheer in two places that she had barely experienced it in either. This year felt different. We had established our own new traditions, a small tree in the front window, homemade ornaments, hot chocolate while watching holiday movies. We would have Christmas Eve and morning together, then Emma would go to Jason's for dinner and stay overnight. The arrangement was clear, the expectations managed. There was still sadness in the division, but it no longer dominated our experience. 2 weeks before Christmas, I was at the garden center working my shift when David, my boss, approached with an unusual request. The Willow Creek Community Center called, he said, handing me a stack of printouts. They're looking for someone to redesign their outdoor space for spring, something sustainable, low maintenance, but still beautiful. I recommended you. I stared at the papers in my hand, site plans, budget outlines, project requirements. This is a major commercial project, David. Are you sure I'm ready for that? He smiled. More than ready. Your residential designs have been getting rave reviews, and your community garden project showed you can handle larger scale planning. Besides, they specifically asked about you after seeing the article in the local paper. The article had been a small feature on the community garden, with a brief mention of my landscape design work and background. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. but apparently it had made an impression. "Think about it," David urged. "This could be your chance to transition to full-time design work, if that's what you want." That evening, I spread the project, materials across the dining table, trying to envision what I might do with the space. Emma wandered in, curious about my intense focus. "What's all this?" she asked, examining one of the site maps. "A potential design project. A big one." She studied the papers with interest. "The community center? That's where I have violin lessons." "I know. They want to redo the outdoor areas, make them more usable, more beautiful." Emma picked up a pencil and began sketching on one of the blank sheets I had laid out. "You should put a small amphitheater here," she said, indicating. "A sloped area for outdoor concerts and stuff. And maybe rain gardens along this edge where it always gets muddy." I watched her work, impressed by her instinctive understanding of how spaces could be both functional and beautiful. "Those are excellent ideas." She grinned. "I've been paying attention when you talk about your designs. It's interesting." An unexpected warmth spread through my chest. My daughter, who I had sometimes feared was pulling away from me toward the glossier life Jason and Vanessa offered, had been listening all along. Not just hearing, but absorbing, appreciating, contributing. "Want to help me with the initial concept?" I asked impulsively. "We could work on it together this weekend." Emma's face lit up. "Really? You'd let me help with a real project?" "Absolutely. You have good instincts for this." We spent that weekend at the dining table, sketching ideas, researching plants, creating a vision for a space that could serve the community while honoring the natural environment. It was one of the most enjoyable weekends I could remember, working side by side with my daughter, watching her confidence grow with each idea I incorporated, each suggestion I took seriously. On Sunday evening, as we were putting the finishing touches on our preliminary design, Emma suddenly asked, "Mom, do you think I could be a landscape architect someday? Like you were going to be?" The question caught me by surprise. I had rarely spoken about my original career path, abandoned when I became pregnant with Emma and opted for the more flexible, if less creative, work at the garden center. "You could be anything you set your mind to," I said carefully. "But landscape architecture requires a lot of education. College, probably graduate school, licensing exams." She nodded seriously. "I know. I looked it up. But you did some of that, right? Before me?" "I did," I acknowledged. "I had just finished my undergraduate degree in environmental design when I found out I was pregnant with you. I was planning to apply to master's programs." "Why didn't you go back?" she asked. "After I was older?" It was a question I had asked myself many times over the years. Life got complicated. Your dad's career was taking off, and someone needed to maintain the flexibility to handle your schedule, school events, sick days. The garden center job worked for our family at the time. "But it wasn't what you really wanted," Emma said, with the blunt insight that sometimes took my breath away. "It was a compromise," I admitted. "But that doesn't mean it was wrong. Families involve compromises." Emma was quiet for a moment, absently tracing the contours of our design with one finger. "Dad didn't compromise much, did he?" The question hung in the air between us, fraught with implications I wasn't sure either of us was ready to explore fully. "We made different kinds of compromises," I said finally. "And at the time, they seemed fair to both of us." She nodded, accepting this diplomatic answer. "Well, I think you should go back to school if you want to. You're really good at this stuff. The community center is going to love our design." Our design. The simple phrase filled me with a joy that had nothing to do with professional recognition and everything to do with the connection I felt with my daughter in that moment. A shared passion, a creative collaboration, a bridge between who I had been and who I might still become. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat in my garden, Despite the December chill, the plants were mostly dormant now, but there was beauty even in their winter rest. The architectural bones of bare branches, the promise held in seed pods, the resilience of evergreens against the cold. I thought about compromises and choices, about paths taken and abandoned. I thought about the young woman I had been, with dreams of designing spaces that healed and inspired. I thought about the mother I had become, creating a home where my daughter could grow strong and true. And I realized that perhaps these weren't separate identities at all, but facets of the same self, now ready to integrate in new ways. The Community Center project could be a beginning, I decided. Not just professionally, but personally. A step toward reclaiming parts of myself that had been set aside but never truly lost. And how fitting that Emma had been the one to illuminate this path forward, my truth-telling daughter who saw more clearly than anyone what mattered most. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone chimed with a text. From Jason, of all people. Emma told me about the Community Center project. It's a big opportunity. You should absolutely go for it. You always had an amazing eye for design. That was never the problem between us. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. It was perhaps the most direct acknowledgement he had ever made that our marriage's failure hadn't been about my inadequacies. And it had come now, months after our divorce, weeks after his second wedding, through the technological remove of a text message. Better late than never? Perhaps. But also too little. Too late to heal what had been broken between us. Yet it mattered still to have this small piece of validation from the person whose opinion had shaped so much of my adult life. Thank you, I finally replied. That means a lot. His response came quickly. I mean it. And so does Emma. She can't. Stop talking about the design you're creating together. I haven't seen her this excited about something in a long time. I smiled into the darkness of my winter garden. She has good instincts for it. Takes after her mom. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. As if he was typing, deleting, retyping a response. Finally, yes, she does. I tucked my phone away and stood, brushing leaves from my jacket. It was time to go inside, to the warmth of the home Emma and I had created, to the possibilities that lay ahead. Time to leave the past, with its broken promises and whispered judgments, to rest among the dormant plants of winter, making room for what would bloom when spring returned. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it a burst of renewal. That seemed perfectly timed with the changes in our lives. The Community Center project had been approved with enthusiasm, and I found myself spending most weekends on site, overseeing the transformation of the neglected grounds into the vision Emma and I had created together. The director had been particularly taken with Emma's amphitheater idea, calling it inspired during the final presentation. "You've got quite a talented daughter," she'd remarked as Emma blushed beside me. "The natural slope is perfect for seating, and the acoustics will be wonderful for summer concerts." Those words had stayed with me, warming something deep within. My talented daughter. Not just a reflection of me or Jason, but her own person with unique gifts that were beginning to blossom. As April's showers gave way to May's flowers, our garden at home exploded with color. The perennials I'd carefully planted during those first difficult months after the divorce had established themselves, creating a tapestry of purples, yellows, and pinks that drew compliments from neighbors and even the occasional passing stranger. "Your yard is like a painting," Mrs. Abernathy from across the street commented one evening, as I was deadheading spent blooms. "Makes the whole neighborhood more beautiful." I thanked her, feeling a quiet pride in what I'd accomplished in this small space. The garden had been my therapy, my solace during the darkest days of my marriage's end. Now it stood as testament to what could grow from broken ground when tended with patience and care. Emma had taken to joining me for these evening garden sessions, sometimes helping, sometimes just sitting on the stone bench with her homework or a book. Tonight, she was sprawled on the grass, a geometry textbook open beside her, though she seemed more interested in watching a pair of cardinals flitting among the viburnum bushes. "Mom," she said, rolling onto her back to look up at the deepening blue of the sky. Vanessa moved out. I paused, pruning shears hovering over a fading peony bloom. "When did this happen?" "Last weekend." Dad didn't say anything at first. But then I found her stuff gone from the bathroom, and I asked. Emma plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between her fingers. "He said they're taking a break to figure things out." I set down my shears and wiped my hands on my gardening apron, trying to formulate a response that was honest without being unkind. "How do you feel about that?" Emma considered the question with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "Relieved mostly," she admitted. "She was always trying too hard, you know? Like making smoothies I didn't want, or buying me clothes that weren't really my style. It was exhausting trying to be grateful all the time." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "And your dad? How is he doing?" "Quiet, but not sad exactly." She sat up, crossing her legs. "He's been cooking actual meals instead of ordering in all the time. Last night we made pasta together from scratch. It was kind of fun." The image of Jason and Emma making pasta together was strangely poignant. In all our years of marriage, I couldn't recall Jason cooking much beyond occasional weekend grilling. He had always claimed to be too busy, too tired from work. Now, apparently, he was finding time for things he had never prioritized before. "I'm glad you're having good time with him," I said, meaning it. Whatever my complicated feelings about Jason might be, seeing him develop a more genuine connection with Emma could only be positive. "Yeah, it's been better," she agreed. Then, with the directness that still occasionally caught me off guard, "I think what I said at the wedding changed things. For real, not just temporarily." I sat beside her on the grass, garden tasks forgotten for the moment. "How so?" "He talks to me differently now. Like I'm a person, not just a kid." She squinted up at the first visible stars appearing in the twilight sky. "Yesterday, he actually asked what I think he should do about Vanessa. If they should try to work things out, or if it's better to end it now." I felt a flicker of concern. "That's a lot to put on you, Emma. That's really a decision for the two of them." "That's what I told him," she said, surprising me again with her maturity. I said I couldn't tell him what to do, but that Vanessa always seemed more interested in the idea of having a perfect family than in actually knowing me. And that whatever he decided, I just wanted him to be honest about it, not pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Pride swelled in my chest, alongside a touch of melancholy. When had my daughter become so wise, so articulate about complex emotional truths? Part of me mourned the childhood innocence that had been cut short by adult failings. Another part marveled at the remarkable young woman emerging from those difficult circumstances. "That was a very grown-up response," I said softly. Emma shrugged, but I could tell she was pleased by the praise. "I just don't want any more lies or fake stuff. I'd rather have things be real, even if they're not perfect." "Real, not perfect," I echoed. "That's a pretty good philosophy for life in general." She smiled, then stood and brushed grass from her jeans. "Can we order pizza tonight? I'm starving, and I still have a ton of geometry problems to finish." Just like that, the moment of profound insight gave way to ordinary teenage hunger and homework complaints. I found myself cherishing, both equally, the glimmers of the adult she was becoming and the reminders of the child she still was. As spring stretched into summer, Jason and Vanessa's break quietly evolved into a separation, and then, with remarkably little drama, divorce proceedings. Unlike the emotional hurricane that had accompanied the end of our marriage, this second, dissolution seemed almost anticlimactic. a mutual admission of a mistake made too hastily, corrected before deeper roots could take hold. "It just wasn't right," was all Jason said when he dropped Emma off one Sunday evening in June. "For either of us," I nodded, not pressing for details Emma hadn't already shared. There was a time when I might have felt vindicated by the failure of his second marriage, might have seen it as karmic justice for the pain he had caused us. But those feelings had largely faded, replaced by a more complicated empathy. Jason had hurt us deeply, yes. But he was also hurting himself through choices that seemed increasingly designed to avoid rather than address his own discontent. Olivia, never one to mince words, was less philosophical about the situation. "Honestly, Beck, aren't you even a little bit smug?" she asked over lunch at our favorite cafe. "The man left you for a younger model, had a wedding that your daughter spectacularly disrupted, and now he's single again barely 8 months later. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is." I smiled at her indignation on my behalf. "Maybe I should feel that way," I admitted, "but mostly I just feel sad for everyone involved, especially Emma." "Emma seems to be handling it remarkably well," Olivia observed, stirring her iced tea. "Better than most adults would, frankly." "She is," I agreed. "But she shouldn't have had to develop that kind of resilience so young. She should have been able to just be a kid, not her father's emotional sounding board or moral compass." Olivia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're a good mom, Beck. The best. Emma's lucky to have you." The compliment warmed me, though I still struggled sometimes to see myself as clearly as others seemed to. For so long, I had internalized Jason's growing indifference as evidence of my inadequacy, as a wife, as a woman, as a partner worthy of sustained desire and attention. Even now, knowing intellectually that his issues were his own, there were moments when the old doubts crept back in. Those moments were becoming rarer, though, as my own life continued to flourish in unexpected ways. The community center garden was nearing completion, and the response had been overwhelmingly positive. Several visitors had asked for my business card, inquiring about residential design services. David had reduced my hours at the garden center to part-time, encouraging me to pursue the growing interest in my landscape architecture work. "You've found your calling," he said simply when I thanked him for his flexibility. "Anyone who sees that community center can tell you're doing what you were meant to do." What I was meant to do. The phrase echoed in my mind as I drove home that afternoon. For so many years, I had put my original career ambitions on hold, telling myself it was a necessary sacrifice for family stability. Now I wondered if that had been entirely true, or if I had also been afraid of failure, afraid of success, afraid of changing the delicate balance of a marriage that, in retrospect, had been more fragile than I'd allowed myself to recognize. When I arrived home, I found Emma sitting at the dining table that had become our de facto design studio, sketching intently in a notebook I didn't recognize. "What's that?" I asked, setting down my bag and peering over her shoulder. She started, slightly as if caught doing something secretive, then relaxed. "Just an idea I had. For a garden." I looked more closely at the drawing. It was remarkably sophisticated for a 14-year-old. A garden plan with distinct zones, plant groupings indicated by different shading techniques, even a small water feature centrally located. "This is really good, Em," I said, genuinely impressed. "Where is this garden supposed to be?" She hesitated, then turned the page to reveal a simple site map I instantly recognized. Our backyard. "I was thinking we could add a water feature," she explained, pointing to her drawing. "Nothing. Huge. Just a small pond with maybe some water plants and a few fish. And then these taller plants around it for privacy from the neighbors." I sat down beside her, examining the plan more carefully. It was thoughtful, cohesive, and showed a clear understanding of the space's potential that went beyond mere aesthetics. You've really been paying attention to all this landscape design stuff, haven't you? I said, unable to keep the pleased surprise from my voice. Emma nodded, suddenly looking shy. I like it. The way you take a regular space and see what it could be. How you think about what plants go together and how people will use the space. She flipped to another page in the notebook, revealing more sketches. I've been designing some other gardens too, just for fun. Something shifted in my chest. A recognition of my daughter not just following in my footsteps, but finding her own path that happened to parallel mine. Not out of obligation or lack of other options, but from genuine interest and aptitude. Would you like to help implement this design? I asked. We could make it a summer project before school starts again. Her face lit up. Really? You think it's good enough? More than good enough. It's excellent. I ran my finger along the water feature she'd drawn. We'd need to research the technical aspects of the pond installation, but the concept is solid, and I think it would add something special to our garden. We spent the rest of the evening researching pond kits and water plants, creating a budget and timeline for the project. Emma's enthusiasm was contagious, reminding me of my own early passion for transforming spaces. I found myself wondering what might have happened if I had pursued landscape architecture more seriously after Emma was born, if I had insisted on finding a way to balance motherhood with professional development instead of putting my ambitions entirely on hold. But such thoughts were pointless regrets. Life had unfolded as it had, bringing both pain and joy, loss and discovery. And now, watching Emma calculate the volume of water needed for her pond design, I could only feel grateful for where we had arrived, regardless of the path taken. The pond project became our summer focus, with weekends devoted to digging, lining, and eventually filling the small water feature. Jason, to my surprise, offered to help with some of the heavier work when he heard about it during one of Emma's weekend visits. You don't have to do that, I told him when he raised the possibility of coming over to assist with the excavation. I know, he said simply, but Emma's excited about it, and I'd like to support that, unless you'd rather I didn't. I considered his offer, weighing my desire for boundary maintenance against Emma's potential pleasure in having both parents involved in her project. As long as Emma's comfortable with it, that would be fine, I finally said. And so, on a hot July Saturday, Jason arrived in work clothes ready to dig. Emma directed both of us with cheerful authority, referring frequently to her design plan and making small adjustments as the actual space took shape before our eyes. A little deeper on that end, Dad, she instructed. Mom, do you think we should curve the edge more here? It was surreal, working alongside Jason in such a domestic setting after everything that had happened. There were awkward moments of accidentally synchronized movements, reaching for the same tool, stepping aside to let the other pass, muscle memories of a shared life that no longer existed. But there were also moments of surprising ease, of three people focused on a common task, finding a rhythm that required no discussion of past hurts or future complications. During a water break, Jason surveyed the half-completed pond with appreciative eyes. This was all your idea, Em? He asked, genuine admiration in his voice. Most of it, she acknowledged. Mom helped with figuring out the technical stuff, but the design is mine. It's really impressive, he said. You've got a good eye. Like your mother. The compliment, so casually given, caught me off guard. Jason had rarely acknowledged my design abilities during our marriage, treating my interest in landscape architecture as a hobby rather than a serious professional path. Emma beamed at the praise. Thanks. I'm thinking maybe I want to study landscape architecture someday, like Mom was going to before she had me. Jason glanced at me, surprise evident in his expression. I didn't know you were still interested in that. The community center project rekindled it, I said simply. And it seems I've passed on some of that interest to Emma. You should go back to school, Beck, he said suddenly. Finish your degree. You always had talent for it. The suggestion was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. Go back to school? At 40? With a teenage daughter and a mortgage and responsibilities? The idea seemed simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Maybe someday, I said non-committally, reaching for my gardening gloves. Right now, I'm focused on building my client base with the skills I already have. We returned to work, but the seed had been planted in my mind. Why not go back? Why not pursue the dream I had set aside? Emma was becoming more independent. Each day, my design business was growing steadily. Perhaps there would never be a perfect time, but this moment, this season of renewal in my life, might be as good as any. The pond was completed by the end of July, a small but perfect addition to our garden. Emma had selected water lilies and marginal plants with careful consideration of color and form. Small solar lights around the edge created a magical glow in the evenings. The stones we had carefully arranged along the perimeter were already beginning to seem as if they had always been there, as nature gradually reclaimed the human intervention. On the night we officially declared the project finished, Emma and I sat on the garden bench, listening to the gentle trickle of the small waterfall feature and watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "I'm really proud of what we created," Emma said, her voice soft in the twilight. "It's exactly how I imagined it would be." "So am I agreed. "You have a natural talent for this, Em. The way you visualized the space, considered the site, lines from different angles, chose plants that complement each other. Those aren't skills everyone has." She smiled, pleased by the professional assessment. "Do you think I could really be a landscape architect someday? For real?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "You already think like one. The education would just give you the technical knowledge to support your natural instincts." She was quiet for a moment, tracing the grain of the wooden bench with one finger. "Would you go back to school with me? Not right now, obviously, but when it's time for me to go to college? So we could both study it?" The question caught me completely off guard. "You mean both pursue landscape architecture degrees at the same time?" She nodded. "You could finish what you started. We could even take some classes together, maybe. It would be cool." The idea was simultaneously touching and startling. My daughter, imagining us as peers, fellow students in a field we both loved. Not embarrassed by her mother's presence in what would typically be a young person's domain, but actually welcoming it. "That's a beautiful thought, Em," I said carefully. "But college is still a few years away for you. A lot might change by then." "Maybe," she acknowledged. "But I like thinking about it, about both of us designing gardens someday, maybe even having a business together." The vision she described was seductive in its simplicity and rightness. Mother and daughter, combining complementary strengths to create beautiful spaces. It was a future I had never imagined for myself, having been so focused on survival for so long that thriving had seemed like a distant, uncertain possibility. "I like thinking about that too," I admitted. "And whether or not that exact future comes to pass, I'm grateful that we share this passion." Emma leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture of affection that was becoming rarer as she grew older and more independent. "Remember when you told me you weren't lonely because you had me? After Dad left?" "I remember." "I think I understand that better now," she said thoughtfully. "It's not just about having someone around. It's about having someone who gets you, who sees the real you." "Yes," I agreed, my throat tightening with unexpected emotion. "That's exactly it." We sat in companionable silence as true darkness fell, the solar lights around the pond creating a soft glow that reflected on the water's surface. In that moment of perfect peace, I felt something settle within me, an acceptance of the path that had brought us here, a gratitude for what had been preserved and what had been discovered through the breaking and rebuilding of our family. The Whispers around town had long since moved on to newer, more interesting subjects than my failed marriage. The pitying glances had faded as I had established myself as not just Jason's ex-wife, but as Rebecca Miller, landscape designer, mother, community member in my own right. Even the sharpest memories of betrayal and humiliation had lost their cutting edge, softened by time and the gradual rebuilding of my confidence and identity. "Mom?" Emma's voice broke into my thoughts. "Do you ever regret marrying Dad, even though it ended badly?" The question deserved honest consideration. I looked at the young woman beside me, this remarkable, insightful, brave daughter who was the living embodiment of what had been good and true in my relationship with Jason, despite its ultimate failure. "No," I said finally. "I regret that. He broke his promises. I regret the pain we all experienced. But I could never regret the choices that brought you into my life." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I'm glad," she said simply, "because even though everything fell apart, we built something new, something that's ours." As if to emphasize her point, a light breeze stirred the surface of the pond, sending ripples across the water that caught and reflected the starlight. Something new. Something ours. In the garden we had created together, with its blend of careful planning and wild beauty, I saw the perfect metaphor for what we had managed to salvage and grow from the ashes of what had been lost. They had whispered about my failed marriage, about how I wasn't wife material, about the woman who had supposedly been my upgrade. But in the end, those whispers had faded to insignificance in the face of a louder truth. That sometimes what breaks us open is exactly what allows new growth to emerge, stronger and more authentic than what came before. As Emma and I sat in our garden that night, surrounded by the life we had nurtured both within and around us, I knew with quiet certainty that we were exactly where we were meant to be. Not because our path had been easy, or because our family had stayed intact in the way I had once hoped, but because we had faced our challenges with courage and integrity and emerged not just intact, but flourishing. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.